and welcome or welcome back to the Emily Knits channel. My name is Emily. I am a knitter and crocheter in my mid-30s, based in the north of Nottinghamshire in the UK, where I live with my husband and our 2 dogs close to Sherwood Forest. Today we have a really exciting video. I was going to be filming a normal traditional format podcast here today. Sorry, I've just noticed the halo of frizz around the top of my hair. Oh well. I was going to be filming a normal traditional format podcast today. That's what I usually do every alternate week. But we hit a little bit of a milestone over the last couple of weeks, completely unexpected, because I had sort of said in my head that I wanted to get to this by sort of January next year, which is when I've been on YouTube for about 2 years, but we got to 2,000 subscribers. So thank you so much to all of you that are here and subscribed, and that come back to hear me ramble week on week. I'm not going to go into the thank yous too much because that would just be a video of me saying thank you. I will get very carried away with it, but I'm incredibly grateful for each and every one of you who comes back and watches, who's subscribed, who likes my videos, the lovely comments I get and the community we've built. But instead of doing a normal format podcast today, I thought we would do a Ask Me Anything. So when I got to 1,000 subscribers at the beginning of 2025, I sort of said, which would you like to see me do? Would you like to see me do a stash tour? I think it was Ask Me Anything or Unpopular Knitting Opinions. I can't remember what the other two were. And basically the Unpopular Knitting Opinions and Ask Me Anything were really, really close, but the stash tour was ever so slightly more popular. So I decided when I got to 2,000, that would probably be a really good point at which to do that. So I put on Instagram in my stories and I put on the YouTube community post as well. Ask Me Anything or give me your Unpopular Knitting Opinions, because we'll talk about both. And yeah, that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do a little bit of a knit and chat. I'm going to briefly touch on, you can always find me, where you can find me, I forget this all the time, you can find me down below, you can find me down below. I am really generally quite responsive in the comments as much as I possibly can be, but I'll put below details of everywhere you can find me, which is Instagram, Ravelry, Ko-fi and email, all of which are absolutely fine to contact me by. I'm trying to get a bit better at keeping my Ravelry up to date, so that is getting a bit better now. And I do have a Ravelry wish list as well if you wanted to support the channel through there, but there is absolutely no obligation. What am I wearing? I'm wearing my Amelia tee by Iris of Iris Makes. You will have seen me talk about this before. If you're a returning viewer, you'll be used to that as well if you're a returning viewer, me fumbling over my words. But yeah, I will pop some links in the cards or in the description box below to where I talked about this a bit more as a finished object. I do have a link down in the description box, which is a link, an affiliate link for Iris's patterns. That if you follow the link and you use my discount code, it gives you 10% off any of or all of Iris's patterns. You can buy one, you can buy as many as you like. It will give you 10% off everything. And it gives me a little bit of a kickback as well. If you don't want to use the affiliate link, that's absolutely fine. I can still very highly recommend Iris's patterns. This is the 4th, 5th of hers I've made. I've loved them all. And I've actually seen Iris's patterns popping up a couple of times recently in a couple of pattern roundups that I've watched. And that's made me really, really smile because I adore her patterns. So I'm so happy to see her getting a bit more recognition. But anyway, yeah, all that'll be down below. And then what am I going to be working on while we're knitting and chatting? This is a bit off-piste for me, if you have been here before. I'm actually knitting a petite knit pattern. So yeah, if you've been watching for a little bit, you'll know that I'd said in my last podcast and in my autumn knitting plans that I wanted to try knitting a petite knit sweater, the key sweater. That's not what I'm going to be working on today. I have cast that on, I have started working on that. I am just in the short rows on that, so that is not a good point at which to have it to be working on something whilst we're talking. And I ended up casting on an Oslo hat. Please excuse this really random blue stripe. Basically, one of my friends was working on an Oslo hat. I've been on a bit of an accessories kick. We are going to talk about that properly when we get into the next podcast episode. I finished a Musselburgh. I started and finished a Musselburgh for my husband since the last time we spoke. And off the back of that, one of my friends was making an Oslo hat and she was sending me progress pictures and stuff, and it just looks really nice and clean and crisp. It's that same kind of aesthetic that I like with the Musselburgh, and I decided to give it a go and try it and see. And the reason it's got this weird bit here is essentially I am knitting this out of I've forgotten the yarn base. It's a DK weight from Woolen Twine. Woolen Twine is a hand dyer based in I think she's in Hamburg in the north of Germany. There's a really loud plane going over. I don't know if you guys can hear that. That sounds really low. Really low. I think we're on a bit of a flight path, and quite often we hear, like, we're not near a major airport, but quite often we hear things going to like air shows and things like that, because we're not super far from Lincoln, and there's a lot of RAF bases and stuff around Lincoln and Lincolnshire. So I think that may well have been something a bit older flying over. We do see some really cool stuff. Anyway, tangent. Wool and twine. All natural dyed, I think all woolly wools, and this is a DK base, and I can't remember the blend. I will have to pop it on screen if I can find it. This is in the shade Fennel, and it's absolutely beautiful. I was really worried this wasn't going to show up well on camera, but that is really, really good. It's like a grey, light green, very neutral colour. I only have one skein of it, so my husband got me one skein of that and one skein of her sock yarn for Christmas last year. I had asked for some yarn from her for Christmas, which was why he got it for me. And I decided it would make a perfect Oslo hat, but the yardage suggested for the adult medium, or the women's, I think she calls it. Yeah, the yardage she suggests for the adult medium, or the women's, or whatever she calls it, this size, is actually a little bit more than 100 grams of DK. It's like 500 and something meters. It's like, I think it's like 500 and something meters. But that's of yarn held double. Whatever it was, I was going to be really close, but I wasn't going to be quite there. Or I feel like it would have... my friend that's making them has made two recently, and she said it took bang on 100 grams of yarn, so that would be some really tight yarn chicken that I didn't fancy playing. So I thought I would use a little bit of DK weight scrap yarn first, just to knit some... I think I've got 10 rows there or something, because essentially what happens at the end is your brim is folded up like that. So that won't be visible at all from the outside, but it's meant that I'm going to be able to maximise this beautiful skein from wool and twine, and still, you know, make it work. So anyway, that's what I'm going to be knitting on. I am at the point where I am just on stockinette in the round, and I'm going to be knitting on this. I have a warm drink. I have a candle lit because it was 8 degrees outside this morning, 8 degrees Celsius. It's finally starting to feel a little bit autumnal, and I'm so happy about it. But yeah, I've got my laptop down here with some questions on. I'm going to start with the questions, and then there was some, like I say, there were some unpopular knitting opinions as well. So we'll talk about that, those. And yeah, I suppose the first little disclaimer is, if I express an opinion that's different to yours, that's absolutely fine. I don't run a space here where you have to agree with me to be here. I think, you know, we can think different things and still get on. So I would love to hear your opinions on these down below, or if you have any unpopular knitting opinions that you want to share that I haven't chatted about, or or any questions that you want me to answer that I haven't answered already, pop them down in the description box below. And I'm not going to start knitting yet, because the first one of my friends put, introduce the dogs and how to tell them apart. And I know you've seen one of the dogs, but you haven't seen both of them, so I thought that actually was quite good. So 1 minute. So one dog who you've definitely seen before is Pepper. This is Pepper. Say hi. Pepper is Pepper. So we've got two dogs. I don't know if I said that a minute ago. We've got two dogs. They're both the same breed. They're both Shiba Inus. I will pop like the Wikipedia page down below to Shiba Inus if you want a bit more information. They are technically a Japanese breed, although this one was bred in Lincolnshire. Not my face. Every time you gotta lick the face. Pepper is the younger of our two dogs, but we've had him longer now. We had him from a puppy. We got him in 2020. He's 5 years old. He turned 5 years old a couple of weeks back on the 11th of September. That date maybe should have been a sign. Also the fact that his mum was called Causing Chaos, because oh my god, that is this dog personified. He is a 5-year-old puppy basically. And he's dopey, he's quite affectionate, he's quite a soft little thing, but honestly, my husband has said about one of his previous dogs, and I think this really applies to Pepper, is that he's like a male model. He is absolutely beautiful, but there is nothing going on between those ears. Bless him. He is the most daft little dog I've ever known. But he does quite like a cuddle, as you can see. He is they're very similar size. Pepper should be a bit bigger. He's been asleep, which is why he's all like ragdolly and he's so sleepy. He should be a bit bigger because he's a boy and our other dog is a girl, but she's a bit big for a girl. He's a bit small for a boy. I think we got the run to the litter, unfortunately, because you are a bit crap, aren't you, mate? I love you to bits, but you are a bit crap. Not my face. But he is a bit lighter in colour. His ears are a bit smaller, and you can't see, and I'm not going to be able to show you, I don't think, because he's not going to stand up by it. stand up. He has a lovely, he's now frightened because I made him stand up. He's got a lovely proud curly tail. I might have to see if I can, there we go, there's the tail. He's got a lovely gorgeous curly tail, which is what the breed should have. It should sit up there like that. That's it, there's your tail. And he looks like a fox. I always say he looks like a Disney fox. And let me get the other dog for you. Very different dogs. She is extremely unhappy with me for this. This one, I say, is our legitimate rooting through your bins on a Saturday night fox. So this is Chase. This is the dog you don't see very often, and you can kind of see the difference in behaviour. She's not very happy about this, so I won't keep her up here too long. She's a bit older than Pepper. We think she's about 8, I think. So we got her when she was 3. She was going to be a show dog, and she'd spent the first 3 years of her life with the breeders where we got her from, which was the same breeder we got Pepper from. They do this wonderful thing when they're happy. She's sort of doing it, which is airplane ears. The ears go out to the sides. She's not happy about being picked up out of her bed, but she does quite like a cuddle, so this is what this is. And she is so different to Pepper in so many ways. She is a very, very sweet dog. She took a very long time to get used to us because she just hadn't been a pet. Thanks for that. She's also a bit grim with she licks. She loves to lick anything that's even remotely sweaty. It's a bit grim, and her breath stinks. But she's a really beautiful dog. She's a bit, I hope you can see, she's a bit darker than Pepper. She's got bigger ears than Pepper. She's a bit more slight, her fur's a little bit less dense, and the big difference, I'm not going to be able to show you this because she's not going to be happy with this at all. Okay. Is her tail, unfortunately, I think was broken before we got her. There is no feeling in the end of this tail. It's quite a lot darker as well. Her tail is more black. But yeah, her tail doesn't curl. It's there's this sort of, you can tell when she wags it, she holds it like that. She sort of kinks it to one side, and when she wags it, you can tell there is no movement or anything. She doesn't know I'm grabbing that, whereas the base of her tail she does. So this is our beautiful, slightly older lady. She's just absolutely gorgeous. She's such a sweet little dog as well. Everything's on her terms. She likes affection on her terms, and she'll tolerate it. But yeah, this is Chase, and you don't see her very often because she's much more nervous and shy than Pepper. So, whoop, go on then. So that was the first bit. Now I am covered in dog hair, and we'll actually talk through some questions. Let me get my knitting set up, and we'll start going through some questions. So the next question we had was, what's your biggest yarn pet peeve? Somebody asked. So I haven't written anything down for any of these. I thought we could just have a bit of a chat about them, but this one sprang to mind straight away, and it stuck. Factory knots. It's quite predictable, isn't it? So my biggest pet peeve is definitely factory knots. It's I don't think there's any need for it really, genuinely. I think, I don't mind a couple, because I sort of expect that you're going to get them. But when you get some, I love working with budget yarns. You guys know that I love working with budget yarns. And sometimes it's not always a direct correlation, but sometimes the more budget a yarn is, the more factory knots you're going to find in it. And sometimes it's an absolute nightmare. I don't tend to cut them out. I probably should. I tend to just work them in. Because if I was going to rejoin the yarn, what I've been doing a lot recently is the magic knot. So I'd still have a knot in it anyway, even if I was going to rejoin my yarn. So it doesn't make massive amounts of difference whether I'm cutting that out and rejoining my yarn, or whether I'm having the factory knot. But they're just, if you're not careful, they can create loose stitches. They can create little lumps on the front of your fabric if you don't get them in the right place. They're just really frustrating, and I haven't found a good way to incorporate them in. The only thing you could do, I guess, would be if you were working, I was going to say if you're working flat, to have them at the beginning of a round, but then if you're working in the round, it doesn't really help, does it? So yeah, factory knots absolutely do my nut in. They really do. They're not so bad when crocheting, but they're definitely worse when knitting. And there is a correlation as well between my annoyance with factory knots and how expensive the yarn was. If it was expensive yarn, I had a ball of, I feel like it might have been, not Rama. Durum Natura, maybe Gilead, and I feel like that had a lot of knots in it. And I was quite frustrated about that because of how expensive that yarn was. It wasn't budget-friendly yarn. I feel like it was like £16 for a 100-gram ball. And actually, that's a little bit of an unpopular knitting opinion because everybody raves about that yarn and I didn't really rate it. That is a bit of a... It's not an unpopular knitting opinion, is it? It's just going to be taste will vary. But I'm somebody who likes a rustic yarn. I didn't like that. That was too... almost velvety for me. I didn't like it at all. So factory knots. And the other thing is I like acrylic yarn. I definitely like acrylic yarn. You've seen me use acrylic blends and things like that on the channel quite often, but I really don't like a proper budget acrylic yarn. And actually it's not necessarily just specific budgets. You do just get some acrylic yarns that literally feel like you might as well have cut up a plastic bag. They just no, they don't feel good at all to me. So yeah, not my biggest fan. I'm not the biggest fan of those, and they tend to squeak over your needles or squeak over your crochet hook when you're using them. If it squeaks, I don't want to use it. I don't like it at all. So that's another one for me. However, I do think that's one of the reasons I try and highlight budget-friendly yarns on the channel, is because we've all had those really plasticky acrylics, but they're not all made equal, and there are some really nice quality acrylics out there now. I keep meaning to do like a my favourite acrylic yarns video, but that would mean I haven't tried them all by any means, and that would mean going and trying and finding some of the bigger brands and trying them, and I just haven't got around to doing that yet. So that is coming and on the cards, because I do think there are some really good ones, and I'd like to do a video, a bit diving into trying some of the more popular ones and seeing how they turn out. But yeah, really cheap. The one that always springs to mind is I got some yarn from Aldi, and I actually quite like some of the Aldi yarn. I've used Aldi yarn for a few different things. If you watch my video last week talking about beginner knitting tips, a lot of that patchwork blanket that I shared was made out of Aldi yarn. But their range isn't all made equal either. And I got some a few years back that was in like a pack of 8 balls. And it was like Brights or something, pack of 8 DK Brights. And they felt like pure plastic. They really did. And yeah, they ended up going in the bin. In the end, I kept them for quite a while and I tried to make something out of them, but I just couldn't bring myself to, and they ended up going in the bin. So that is definitely a big pet peeve. If it's so plasticky that it squeaks, don't want to use it. Sorry, don't want it. On the other hand, on the flip side, I know something that some people have as I guess a bit of a pet peeve or a thing they dislike about yarn is splitty yarn, and that doesn't really bother me. I will make it work. I don't find that particularly bothersome at all. I've knit with like bamboo blends and things, which are notoriously splitty, and I've crocheted with them as well, and I find them worth the work. And I guess that's it with a lot of stuff, isn't it? Is it worth the work for you to do that if it's something that does need extra? And everybody's mileage will vary on that. So yeah, that's my factory knots are the main one, and then squeaky yarn is another one. I guess part of that comes with this is one of my unpopular knitting opinions. It might not be unpopular, but certainly it's something I feel quite strongly about. I really dislike wooden needles. I really dislike wooden needles and metal. I don't know if plastic yarn would squeak on wooden needles, so maybe that's different for different people, but the way that I knit, I think I knit quite tightly. And wooden needles tend to cause quite a lot of pain for me. There are some exceptions. I've currently got my cardigan that I'm knitting for my husband, which is just down there, that pheasant hunt cardigan. That is on wooden needles, but it's a very loose gauge, and the needles that I'm using are very sleek wood, so they just glide in. But I massively prefer, I only have I think maybe 2 or 3 pairs of wooden needles. The rest are all metal, and that will always be my preference. Okay. Let's have a look. What's going to be the next one? Your favourite, off the back of that, I guess, your favourite knitting technique or stitch. So I'll do both of those, I think. Stitch is a really easy one. I just like stockinette stitch. I know that is really boring, basic bitch answer, isn't it? Let's be honest, excuse my language. But I quite like just stockinette in the round in terms of to knit. And I think so currently at the moment, I'm really being drawn towards things that are simple. That are quite simple, quite clean, quite crisp, quite effective, and they tend to be quite high stockinette. So currently that is massively a thing for me. I mean, the Amelia is exactly the same. It's pure stockinette with some little details at the ribbon and things, but you know, that is something in terms of a stitch to knit. The knit stitch is absolutely my favourite. Just plain knit in the round all the way around, because I can do it without looking, I can do it without thinking, I can absolutely fly through it. In terms of knitting techniques, For a specific knitting technique, a specific thing to knit, I really love German short rows. I know I'm not alone in that. I know a few people have said it. I really love working short rows, particularly German short rows. I'm not a fan of wrap and turns, and I haven't tried any other type of short rows, but I really genuinely enjoy the short row section of a pan. I don't know what it is about it. I don't know if it's just, I think I find it a bit magic that you can just create this little wedge of fabric. Really clever. Yeah, I love designs that incorporate that into it as a bit of a design feature as well. So there is some, I guess the emotional support chicken is a perfect example. That thing is basically shaped entirely with short rows. So they can be used, obviously most often you'd see them used to try and drop the front of a garment, or to, I guess, to lift the back really. But they can be used as a design feature, definitely, or to create a curved hem or something. And I just think they're really fun to knit, and I like how they look as well. Knitting techniques, I guess overall, like knitting techniques, they vary massively for me, whether, you know, when you're talking about things like intarsia, cables, lace, texture. I really enjoy knitting. I'm still on the fence on intarsia. I'm knitting that cardigan again for my husband, is intarsia. And I'm on the fence with that one, I'll be entirely honest. I like the result. I don't hugely enjoy knitting it. But cables, lace and texture, all three of those things I enjoy. I tend to flip between which one of those I enjoy the most. So recently I've been really craving some cables, so there'll probably be something cable coming up. Colour work obviously goes in with that as well. I love colour work. I haven't knit anything colour work in a while. I do have a plan to knit some colour work shortly. Stranded colour work rather than intarsia. And if I had to pick one of those three, cables, lace, colour work, to knit, I guess in perpetuity, I would probably pick lace, which is unusual for me actually. It's not quite what I would expect myself to say, but I think colour work I either love or I hate. I either love or I hate colour work. I'm not always in the mood for it. Cables are lovely, but I think have a limit to what they're going to look like personally. They're going to look like a cable jumper, whereas lace I think you could create a lot of different designs out of, and it can be used in some really, really surprising ways. So I think if I had to pick one thing that I could only knit moving forwards, it would probably be lace, although it would be a toss-up between lace and colour work, completely honestly. And yeah, knit and stitch I already went over, didn't I? Somebody else asked, what is your knitting or crochet ick? And this one took me a little while to think about, because we've talked about an ick already, haven't we? Plastic yarn, big ick. There's a couple of other ones in there. This is a proper, like, pure ick, in terms of like a physical ick. I have a thing, and I don't know if any of you do, I feel like this is a sensory thing. I do not like anything with sort of like a dry texture to it. This is particularly in fabric, so velvet, chenille, suede, foam. I'm getting goosebumps and I'm feeling nauseous just thinking about touching those things. The thought of, that was just me doing it, the thought of taking velvet and stroking it the wrong way, oh no, proper physical ick, hate it, really can't do it, don't like it at all. So velvet yarns, chenille yarns, do not like them. I haven't seen a suede yarn and I haven't seen a foam yarn, but yeah, I do not like stuff like that. I really hate touching the texture of it, and I think I've tried some chenille yarns and they weren't so bad, but velvet yarns, if you get them the wrong way, I really hate the texture of it. It's an instant ick for me. So it doesn't matter what the project is, I will never be using those. I just won't. Furry yarn's fine. I don't mind furry. It's things that have is it a nap when it goes one way and not the other? Nope, hate it. So in terms of a physical ick, anything like that. And I think that's part of why I didn't like Durand Natura Gilead, because it is quite a dry, almost velvety feeling yarn. So I think that is definitely part of it. I was constantly having to fight the ick whilst I was knitting with it. And in terms of an ick, yeah, not a physical ick, more of a mental ick. We touched on this again in my beginner video that I did the other week of tips for beginners. I really don't like gatekeeping into the hobby, and I really don't like the attitude that I see sometimes. And to be fair, I've not really seen it in our little community at all, and I'm quite glad of that because yeah, I don't want to foster that at all. But I want to encourage inclusivity, and I don't like when I see people being non-inclusive. And I don't mean in terms of things like sizes and stuff like that, but kind of like, well, I don't like this, therefore nobody else can like this. I don't like that designer, therefore nobody else can like that designer. I think that looks bad on you, therefore I'm going to tell you I think that looks bad on you, despite the fact that you clearly think that looks good on you. You know, I said the phrase the other week, don't yuck someone else's yum, and that's a big one for me. That's a massive ick for me, is that if I see that in content that I'm, you know, consuming and things like that, almost shaming, I don't like that at all. I just think, like I said at the beginning, there is so much space in the world for us all to have different opinions, and that's absolutely fine. I don't think that our hobby should be gate-kept, should be, you know, if you don't do it the way that I do it, then you're inherently wrong. One of the things I see it over most often is when people share like videos of themselves knitting on Instagram and things, especially if it's a bit of an unusual way to knit. So I think it was Vera and Rose did, I think it's called combined continental knitting, something like that. And essentially somebody basically put on there that this was wrong and how could she possibly knit like that, and it was just, come on, like, it doesn't matter. She gets the same results as you do. She's happy with the results she gets. She likes to knit that way. Why does it matter if it's not the same as you? So that's a big ick for me. That I'm going to not go much further into that because I get on my soapbox about it, but it makes me quite frustrated because our hobby is such a lovely thing to be able to share. And do you know what? It doesn't matter if I knit with my hands tied behind my back. If I get the knit stitches right, it doesn't matter how I do it, because I get the knit stitches right and I get the purl stitches right. Yeah, anyway, I'm moving on from that one because we'll be here for ages. What else have we got here? How do you decide which whip to work on? As a monogamous knitter, I'd find that overwhelming. I get that. I definitely get that completely. So if you've not been here before, I am very much not a monogamous knitter. I have so many whips on the go at any one time. And honestly, I think some of you have probably put two and two together on this. I think that is very indicative of what my head is like. I speak very fast. The ideas come out quite quickly. And honestly, that's what it's like in there. It's constantly whirling with things. And if I was working on one thing and only one thing, I would get really, really bored. Anyway, so how do I pick? There's a couple of things. So quite often I'm test knitting, or I'm sample knitting, or I've got a deadline, and I tend to, if I've got stuff like that, I tend to prioritise by deadline. So if I've got, you know, a sample knit that's due in a week's time, I'm going to be prioritising that, and most of my time is going to go on working on that, or a test knit or whatever. But it's unusual that I will just have one project that I work on for the entire day. So for example, today I am working on this now, but I've been working on my Lucy cardigan test knit earlier in the day. Yesterday I was working on this a bit, and I was also working on a secret project that I can't show you yet, and on my Edel sample. No, I wasn't. I was working on my cardigan for my husband, and some socks. You know, I do flit. I definitely do flit. And as for how I pick what I want to work on, this is going to sound like such a cop-out, but it's mainly vibes. That sounds so up my own backside, doesn't it? I basically go, okay, deadlines, what have I got that I need to work on? And then what do I actually want to work on? And sometimes they align, and that's great, because then I can sit and spend most of the day, or, you know, the evening or whatever, working on that project. And sometimes they don't. And if they don't, what I do is I use this bad boy, and I will set a timer for 30 minutes. I've done 10 before as well, if it's something I really like. I had it with a sample relatively recently. I can't remember which one it was. I think it was those Colourwork socks I did earlier in the year, or back end of last year, because I have realised that I just do not really enjoy doing Colourwork socks very much. Maybe that's another ick. Colourwork socks, man, they took me so long to get right, and I don't think they were worth that amount of effort. There you go, popular knitting opinion. I do not think that Colourwork socks are really worth the effort. Saying that, I recently bought a pattern very recently that's just been released because it's got foxes on it and they look like my dogs, and I want to make them. So she's fickle. What can I say? I'm fickle. What was I talking about? Yeah, so I'd already had to knit basically the majority of the first sock once, and then I'd realised that it was too tight and it wasn't going to go over my foot. I was behind the deadline a little bit, or I wasn't quite over the deadline, but I think I was going to struggle to get there within the deadline. I wasn't enjoying it. They weren't going to fit. I was getting frustrated with them, so I was doing that in 10-minute chunks. But essentially I'll set a timer for half an hour usually, and I'll do half an hour of work on whatever I should be working on. And I know we've had these conversations recently in my videos about should and shoulding yourself, and I don't like doing that, but whatever my deadline is, if there's something that's got a pressing deadline and that I feel like I need to do a bit more work towards it, that's what I will do. And then once that 30 minutes is up, I have a little bit of a break, and then I'll pick up whatever I want to work on. And that genuinely is, I'll sit and go, okay, I feel like putting half an hour in on my Osler. Okay, I feel like putting half an hour in on my whatever. And sometimes it is, do you know what? I've been really enjoying working on this test knit that I didn't think I wanted to work on. So now I'm going to work on it a little bit longer. And that's fine, because sometimes I just need to push myself through that mental block to get started on it. And generally I'll do that. Sometimes I will pick 2 projects and I'll flip between them. I have in the past done, I'll have to put the link or everything down below. There's apps you can find online on Google and things that are like picker wheels, and you can enter all the names of the different things you want to pick from, and I just spin, and then whatever it lands on, I do half an hour work on that. But even if I'm doing that, I will put in things that I want to work on, or usually a combo of things that I want to work on with a couple of deadlines in there as well. So usually, yeah, prioritise by deadlines, but with some, I guess, selfish knitting, some enjoyment knitting in there as well. As long as I'm making sure I'm getting some done on the deadlines, if I'm feeling that pressure to make sure I get a bit more done on those deadlines at least. That's how I pick. But yeah, I can completely see how that would be stressful to some people. Finding it overwhelming to pick which one you want to work on. It's interesting, isn't it, the psychology of it, because for me, on the flip side, I would find it a little bit stressful knowing that I only have one project to work on. And what if this is such a first world problem? What if I'm in a meeting for work? What if we're watching something? We watched something last night on the telly. We watched a film last night that required me to pay a bit more attention than normal. Or, you know, what if I haven't got something that is just mindless and simple to work on during that? What if the one monogamous project I've got to work on is an intarsia cardigan and I can't work on that mindlessly? And I think that part of it comes from, I've got your hair up my nose. This is why I'm rubbing my nose so much, mate. It's all right, look at me like that. I've got your hair up my nose. Part of it comes from just my mind. My mind moves really fast. While I'm knitting on something, I'm probably generally thinking about 20 other things I'd want to be knitting on. I always end up over preparing as well. And I think that's where some of having so many whips come on, because, like, for example, I'm filming a 1 hour video. I've got 5 inches of stockinette to knit, but I've brought another project that I could cast on just in case I run out of plain stockinette knitting to do whilst I'm filming. I'm not going to in an hour, but in my head, I felt much better having an extra bit to be safe. Oh my word, Emily. Yeah, so I think it would stress me out more only having one thing to work on. I could see having less whips than I've currently got at the moment. I've got a lot at the moment, and I could see a sweet spot being maybe like 3 or 4. Something really simple, pure stockinette in the round, a sock or a hat or something like that. And then a couple of garments maybe that are at different stages, so that you always have one that you can just pick up and work on without having to think about it too much. I could see that working. So maybe one day we'll get there. Probably not, to be honest, because I can't help myself. But yeah, that's just the way my mind works. We covered those 2. Okay, so if you could only knit one pattern for the next year, what would it be? This one took some thinking about. There were options that I thought about. I thought about the Emilia, because obviously that's a bit of a plan that I've got to do that. I thought about the ranunculus, because I think that is a really customizable basic sweater pattern. I did nearly choose the Strange Brew pattern by Tin Can Knits, and that feels like a bit of a cop-out, so I decided not to go for that in the end, because the Strange Brew pattern is essentially a book that teaches you how to knit sweaters, so it's not really a pattern. It has a lot of different patterns within it and a lot of different things within it. I thought about the ranunculus, but I think the gauge is just a bit too... I don't know, I keep coming back to the ranunculus because there's something so fun about knitting it. I think I love to knit garments, so I think I would pick a garment, and I think I would pick something fairly simple and fairly basic that I could convert to many different things. So on that sort of thought, I would go for something probably fairly plain stockinette, DK weight. And the thing that springs to mind when I think of that is the flax by Tin Can Knits. And I think, honestly, if I was limited to one pattern for the next year, I would pick that. Because I think I've knit one before. I knit it for a baby. One of my husband's brothers was having his first baby, so I knit a little one in like teddy bear yarn, which was, I tell you what, a nightmare to knit with, but turned out so cute. It was this little brown little fluffy flax. It was absolutely beautiful. Anyway, it's a really good pattern for taking and using the numbers to make what you want from it. Basically, the numbers are, it's a free pattern. Did I say that? I don't think I said that. Free pattern by Tin Can Knits. And I think it would be a really good pattern to, if that's all I could knit for a year, to be able to use those numbers in so many ways to create cardigans, to create t-shirts, to create jumpers. You know, there would be so much I could do with that I could make into lots of different things, that I think I could genuinely knit from that for a year and not be bored. You could add colour work in. The only thing I guess is it's a raglan. Yeah, it is a raglan, not a circular yoke, isn't it? So maybe not colour work. I mean, you still could. You can do colour work on a raglan. There's nothing to stop you. Or I could do colour work on the body. I could add lace in. I think I'd probably go with something like that. The other thing I thought was the December sweater by the Net Pearl Girl, for the same reason. There is a V-neck version and a round neck version, and it's just a very simple basic pattern that I could just customise in so many different ways that it would be, because the thing for me is I'd worry about being bored by the end of the year of knitting the same thing again and again. As per the previous question, quite a lot of what I do in knitting comes from not wanting to be bored, or not wanting to be caught out without a pattern that I can knit on that suits whatever situation I'm in. So yeah, I think honestly I'd probably go for something like the flax. I think you could turn that into cardigan. Yeah, I think there's so much that I could do with that. Or say the Semper. I think that is everything. Oh no, sorry, there is one more on there, and then we've got a couple from YouTube as well. So, my most exciting thing to knit. What has been your most exciting thing to knit? Now there was a couple of contenders for this. The obvious one that I'm going to give a very honourable mention to, that technically it falls under the most stressful but also the most exciting, was my wedding dress. So if you've not been here before, or you weren't here then, my husband and I got married in October last year. We're actually coming up on our 1 year anniversary, which is mad. We'd been together quite a while before we got married, before we got engaged, so it just felt like a logical sort of continuation for us. And we didn't have, I don't think I actually spoke much about it on here, we didn't have a massive ceremony. That's not us. We had 4 guests, which were just parents, like we're talking proper immediate family. We didn't have siblings. I don't have any, but he didn't have any of his siblings there. We didn't have friends there. We literally just had 4 guests. And it just felt like the most perfect expression of us and our relationship and our love for each other. Neither of us wanted a big massive ceremony and everything, so it didn't feel like this huge like watershed moment for us. It just felt like a natural continuation. So in some ways it feels like we've been married a lot longer, and in other ways it feels like 2 minutes since we got married. All of it incredibly positive. So yeah, nothing negative out of any of that. But I pretty much as soon as we got engaged decided I wanted to knit my wedding dress, because I am a basket case, I think, apparently. And I knew I didn't want anything traditional. I didn't want anything white. Again, very non-traditional ceremony. We got married at the registry office with 4 guests. Yeah, we're not the most traditional of people. And I knitted the Melidas dress by Inez Vernet, and I did it as a test knit. Can you believe I test knit my wedding dress? That's mad, isn't it? And that was simultaneously the most exciting and the most stressful thing that I've ever knit. It will probably continue to be my crowning achievement. I still have it. It's a little bit big on me now. I think I could actually make it still fit by shortening the sleeves. I'm just a bit nervous to do that because it's my wedding dress. I don't want to ruin it. But I made it out of Knitting for Olive pure silk in the colourway Copper. It was utterly incredible. It took me months to make, but it was perfect on the day. It was exactly what I wanted it to be. I cannot highly enough recommend that pattern. You know, would I ever do it again? I don't think so. No, because I honestly don't think, if I didn't have the deadline of a wedding, I don't think I would have made it. Because I was knitting an entire dress and I had my midi length. And if you've not been here before, I have mentioned previously, but I haven't for a bit. I'm tall. I'm 6 foot tall. And I was several stone heavier than I currently am. So there was a lot more fabric to knit, and you're knitting flat. Knitting for Olive pure silk held single on 2.75mm needles I needed to get gauge. So yeah, very stressful. I did finish it a couple of weeks before the wedding. It wasn't like completely to the wire. But it was basically, I didn't have an alternative if that didn't work out. So it had to work out because we were getting married on that date. We'd booked everything, we'd paid for everything, we had our honeymoon booked straight afterwards. It needed to work, but it was also the most love and care and attention I've ever poured into a project, and the most special thing that I've made. In terms of the most exciting pattern, like the most engaging pattern, that probably is partly one of them. Once I got onto the skirt, not so much, but the top bit is really interesting. The constructions that you do on that top bit are, well, the details that Inez puts in there are so good. It's such a beautiful pattern. In terms of the most engaging or the most exciting thing to knit, honestly, completely opposite end of the spectrum, I think it's been the emotional support chicken. You are constantly doing something different. You are constantly working short rows. There's constantly something new to do. There are a couple of bits of it that I'm not a big fan of. The wattle and comb and the garter panel that you do for the base of it. They're just a bit basic. They're not basic. They're boring compared to the rest of the pattern. But in terms of excitement for that has definitely been one of them. If I take it as the most exciting thing to crochet, the Yorkshire blanket by Mima Makes, of Mima Makes, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed it. I did it as a make along, a crochet along. You got you got a certain number of different square patterns released a week, and they're just beautiful. And again, I'm originally from Yorkshire. That's Yorkshire tea I'm drinking from, of course. Can't drink anything else. I get kicked out. Anyway, being stupid. It had meaning. It was the first time I'd ever come across Em's content, and I love watching her YouTube now. I've been lucky enough to actually meet up with her, and we've had a knit and chat date, and I really loved that. I'm going to meet her again, I think, in a few weeks at Yorkshire Yarn Fest. She said she's going. I said I'll see her there. She's a really lovely person, but also absolutely wonderful creator and designer, and that pattern is really fun. That was also where I first discovered Yarnsmith's Pebble Haze, which has become one of my all-time favourite yarns, particularly the prints. And watching how those different colours worked up and everything, that was also one of my most exciting projects to crochet, definitely. I think that's everything on there. So let me jump to the YouTube questions. Okay, so we've got a question, and then we go into unpopular knitting opinions. So we've only got a couple of those, so don't worry. Okay. Whitney of the Knitted by Whitney podcast asked, if money and time were no object, what dream project would I make? And I had to think about this because honestly, I'm going to mention it again. The Melides dress was kind of a dream project. You know, being able to knit my own wedding dress was incredible. Also, like I say, the most stressful thing ever, but incredible. And I'm so immensely proud that I did that. I also knit my husband's tie that matched my dress, and I crocheted myself a shawl that went around my shoulders, and I knit him some socks that matched as well. So I had my copper coloured dress. I'll pop a picture up. I'm sure I can pop a picture up. I had my copper coloured dress. He had a green suit with a copper coloured tie that matched my dress. I did make him a pocket square. We completely forgot to use that on the day. And then his socks were green and rusty orange, so they sort of tied everything in as well. But I think I was so pleased with how it turned out. But to an extent, money's not a huge thing as well, and that really sounds like I'm bragging, and that's not what I mean, because it's not that I can't afford certain yarns, but when it gets really expensive, it's not something I would choose. I'm not saying money's no object. I'm not saying, I can buy whatever I want, so money doesn't matter. The person that I am, I wouldn't want to spend a fortune on yarn because I just wouldn't feel comfortable wearing the thing that I'd made out of it. I am naturally a little bit, not frugal, but I'm just not a huge spendthrift. Saying that, I've got a massive yarn stash, so just spending one big massive whack on yarn would not be something I would ever do, which means that whilst you said money's no object, it does just mean that I don't particularly covet those really expensive yarns, because for me, I would be terrified I'd ruin them. And time definitely a thing. I think I originally thought a dress, but I think honestly, having made the Melides dress, there are no other dresses that I would want to make. I think that is absolutely beautiful. If money and time no object, I'd go back and do it to the floor. Would I? I say that, but I don't actually know if I'd wear it like that. And I did like it at the midi length. I didn't want a full length wedding dress. I liked it at the midi length, so maybe not. But the thing that came to mind, the one yarn that came to mind when I was thinking about money was Noro yarn. Now, when I thought about that, the thing that came to mind massively was like I occasionally watch AKA Nora Knits. I don't always watch her. We talked about this in my favourite knitting and crochet YouTubers video. I prefer channels that are a little bit less edited, a little bit more, I guess, like my content that I put out. But I was watching, I think it was last year, while she was making her sand cardigan by Maria Isayeva, who is Ula Knitwear, I think. And she made it out of the most gorgeous Noro yarn. And I think that's probably what I would do. I would probably make a massive, oversized, floor-length duster cardigan. I would want it to be huge and cozy, because money no object. I wouldn't be like, okay, what's the size I can make that I could get away with, that I don't have to use so much yarn. I would make a really nice oversized one, really slouchy, and I would do complete like floor length duster. I really would, and I'd do it out of Noro, because I think some of the colours in Noro are absolutely stunning. It's just not something that is ever price effective for me. I was talking about this relatively recently, I think, when I was talking about my autumn knitting plans, because I want to knit the Pentapillar. I think it's just called the Pentapillar, or the Pentapillar Pullover by James N. Watts, and that's intended to be knit out of Noro. And it just isn't, it's just, I can appreciate the look of Noro, but it's just not in the price range for me. And there are not super many alternatives on the market that have that same kind of really slow colour change. So yeah, it would be some sort of Noro. The other thing that sprang to mind was actually an Amelia in Cardiff Cashmere, which is the recommended yarn, one of the recommended yarns for the Amelia. And I've never tried cashmere. I've tried a blend of merino, silk and cashmere, but it was predominantly merino with a little bit of silk and a little bit of cashmere. So I think, you know, cashmere on its own, yeah, maybe that would come under it as well. I just think that would be absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, that would be up there as well, definitely. But I think to maximise the money and time no object, because also the time to knit a floor length cardigan would take me ages. Again, 6 foot tall. So yeah, that would probably be it, a floor length duster in Noro. Moving on to unpopular knitting opinions. Whitney had one, so we'll start with that and then we'll move on to others. Whitney said, spicy knitting opinion, a lot of sweater patterns have too much ease and would look better if they were more fitted and less boxy. Yeah, I agree with this. I definitely agree with this. I think, personally, I'm trying to decide if this is actually what I think. I think personally, most sweaters, that sort of real Scandi, oversized, boxy look, looks good on small bodies. I think it looks good on small bodies and it looks good on a certain aesthetic, but it doesn't look good on everybody. I think personally, if you are not the size and shape of petite knit, it is not as flattering on you as it is on her, personally. And I also caveat this with, you can wear whatever the hell you like. You can absolutely wear whatever the hell you like. I don't think it should matter what other people think of what stuff looks like on you. What matters is how you feel in it, and if you like that look, that's absolutely fine. I do think, particularly on bigger bodies, being somebody who has been in a bigger body for most of her life, I do not think that's super flattering on bigger bodies, because I think what it looks like is what it makes it look like, and this is never the case. I think personally, for me at least, it made it look like I was trying to hide my figure. And that's what it made me feel like. So it made me feel almost like I was going into myself. I prefer things that have, this doesn't have no ease, but you can see my body shape through it. You can't, it's not just I used to call it like maternity wear. If you know, when you go to the shops, this is specifically to people who fall into plus size. You go to the shops, you look at all the nice clothes, they don't go up to your size. So you go to the curve section or the plus section or the whatever they call it in whatever shop, if they've got one. And what you will find is Empire line, flowy, oversized, baggy. And I speak for probably not all plus size people out there, but I can probably give a good guess that I speak for quite a lot of them when I say we don't need to be hidden. There is nothing wrong with our bodies. They're just bodies. They do what we need them to do. They get us around from day to day. We don't need to be wearing a bin bag or maternity wear, was what I used to call it. Like I say, it used to feel like, well, we just need to hide this away. So let's just put you in a big sack. And I think sometimes that's what a lot of positive ease can look like. And I think for me, particularly on bigger bodies, it's not as flattering. I think I prefer on myself, and I preferred on myself when I was bigger, less ease. I am trying to lean into a little bit more at the moment. going with the recommended ease that a designer suggests, but that is mainly because I've had a bit of a run of bad luck this year with patterns that I've made, and just no reflection on the pattern really, but some poor yarn choices, I think, and I've just ended up not wearing the things that I've finished. So I'm sort of trying to emulate, it's not here, I've had it on today, but I think I've left it upstairs. I'm trying to emulate the success that I had with my Ekin sweater by Sophie of the Knit Pearl Girl, which I knit in January, and I have worn so much in a relatively short space of time. It has skyrocketed not only into the position of most worn sweater this year, but I think, I know, I'm confident saying I know it is my most worn sweater that I have ever made. And that is quite oversized. That is more oversized than I intended it to be. It came out a bit big. But I think part of the reason I wear it so much is because it's easy to throw on because it's oversized. So I am trying to sort of investigate that a little bit more for myself this year. But I am finding for myself generally that somewhere between 4 and 6 inches of positive ease is what I like. Maybe a little bit less than that sometimes, 2 to 6 inches maybe. 8 to 10 inches, generally a bit much for me, and that is what a lot of patterns at the moment are recommending. I think they look great in pictures. I just don't think they look so great in reality all the time. And yeah, I think that is entirely personal preference, isn't it? So I kind of agree with that on Whitney, and I wonder if that's because we both are people who have been in bigger bodies and like I say, as somebody who doesn't conform to what society says you should normally be, generally the clothes that you can purchase are big and sort of suggest that you should be hidden away. So I think maybe some of it comes from that, of not wanting to do that. I also think it's one of the most important things you can learn as a knitter is what kind of ease you like on your body. And I say that as somebody who is still playing about with it at the moment, trying to work out what kind of ease she likes. But yeah, I think it's really important because you can adjust patterns. You can, you don't have to do the recommended ease that designer says. That's one of the best things about it. It's one of the easiest ways to customise a knitting pattern to fit how you want, is to change the ease. So knit a smaller size if you want more ease, knit a bigger size if you want less ease. But I do think it's really, really good and really beneficial as a knitter to understand ease and understand the kind of ease you like to see on your body for your size. But yeah, I do agree with that, definitely. Another unpopular knitting opinion is, my unpopular opinion is that I hate casting on new projects. The cast on row and first couple of rows are always so slow and annoying. I never get when people are excited to cast on. I had to think about this for a minute because I've never really thought about it, but actually I kind of agree. I like casting something new on. I find the process of having a new cast on exciting, the just getting going on a new project. But the actual mechanics of casting a project on, yeah, I'm with you, I really hate it. I really don't like it. Pretty invariably, and you can guarantee if it's a test knit this will be the case, I will mess up the cast on. Whether I twist my joining row or I just get my stitch count wrong or something I get wrong, there is usually something. Generally what it is usually is if I'm doing long tail, I haven't got enough yarn or I've got way too much yarn. And the first row after casting on, I agree with that completely, is always a nightmare. If I'm casting on something like socks or a lot of ribbon, I kind of have to make sure I've got time to do the cast on and the first row, because if I leave it at that first row, I won't get through it, because that first row for me is always tight, especially when you're joining in the round. I find it an absolute nightmare. Once I'm through that, then I'm flying. But yeah, I agree. I completely get the hype of casting on a new project, because I definitely get that new excitement, the new momentum, the having just gone through picking colours and picking sizes and being raring to get go. The actual mechanics of casting on, I agree, not the biggest fan, don't like that very much at all. And the last unpopular knitting opinion, I actually had to do some research on this because this was just one of my friends that shared this, and all she put was Tom Daly with the angry sweary emoji. So I had to do a little bit of research into this because I'll be honest, I don't pay much attention to Tom Daly at all. He just doesn't come onto my radar. I know obviously he was massive a few years back because he was in the Olympics knitting and all that sort of stuff. And I kind of see where she's coming from with this. I guess a lot of the controversy around Tom Daly comes from the fact that he is being lauded for doing something that people have been doing for years, that there are much more, people doing in a much more complex manner, particularly the kind of patterns that he's come out with. It's basically a white man's done something therefore let's shout about it, when women of all colours, creeds, races, backgrounds, religions have been doing it for hundreds of years, and it's kind of normal. And I think I see that. I definitely see that. I also see the flip side, though, that he has brought a lot of attention to the hobby, and a lot of people might have gotten into it because of him that maybe wouldn't have otherwise, and I think that's great. It also is great to see men doing knitting. But, there is a but. A lot of the controversy that I've seen more recently, when I looked this up recently to do this video, was around the fact that a lot of his patterns are quite basic. I don't know whether he's come up with them or not, or whether it's somebody else is doing it for him, because there is that question of, is it being ghostwritten? So is it actually his work that he's passing off as his work? They are quite basic. I've heard a couple of people trying to knit them. I've seen them on YouTube, I think, and not having the best time with the patterns, so they're not exactly the most user-friendly. And I guess it's that he's getting so much hype for doing what essentially are very basic patterns, when there are people out here, like some of the designers that I highlight on here, this not being an example, but this being an example, or Maya of Maya Tinks, or Leah of the Ruby and Pearls podcast. There are some absolutely fantastic small designers who are busting their balls, for want of a better phrase, trying to make themselves known and doing, Maya springs to mind, some incredibly well thought out designs, some really clever, intelligent designs that make really crisp, clean, wearable pieces, almost like store-bought. And then some white man comes along and puts out a really basic cabled sweater pattern, and because of who he is, I definitely do get that. And I think the flip side for me is there are some absolutely fantastic male creators and male designers, Martin Story, Maxim Sear, Stephen West. There are some absolutely fantastic male designers. There are male YouTubers, there are male creators, there are male knitters everywhere who are doing incredible things. Jimmy Does Knitting is another one. He's doing some incredible designs and some incredible knitwear of his own. He's done a series recently, which I'll link below. It wasn't a series, sorry, it was one video where he recreated a Prada sweater that he'd seen on the runway. He just decided he wanted to do it, so he did it. There are some really incredible male creators that that don't get that limelight because they're not an Olympian. On the flip side, I think our hobby in many ways can be a bit lacking in diversity. It is very generally white, generally female, and probably often from a general demographic who can afford to buy a certain amount, socioeconomic demographic. Anything that encourages men, LGBTQ plus people, BIPOC, anything into our hobby is not a bad thing. But yeah, I think he gets a lot of hype for something that a lot of people are doing a lot better than, but because they're not so known, they're not going to get the same. I think the main thing for me is the fact that not all of his patterns seem to work, and I can't really speak to that because I've never knit them for myself, but I've seen creators on YouTube trying to make them and not having the best time with them because they don't work very well, the numbers aren't great, the fit isn't very good. Have they been tested, these patterns? Are they inclusive? I don't actually know. Have they been rigorously tested? Like I said, is it his designs? Are they ghostwritten? Are they being held to the same standard as we would hold any other designer? Not so sure if they are. So yeah, that's a part of it, isn't it? That's part of it. Yeah, I can see her point on that. That's all of them that I've got, but I am going to add one little unpopular knitting opinion at the end that's mine. And I don't think any of you will be surprised by this if you've been watching me for a while. But I think these are not just the only brands, but these are sort of indicative of it. Liquor needles, mood bags, redesigned project bags, things like that. They're the main ones that spring to mind. I don't think they're anything special. I think they're just about status. I said it. I don't think there's any reason you need to buy liquor needles. I think they are far overpriced for what they are. Maybe the wooden ones are great. Like I said before, don't use wooden needles. Don't like wooden needles very much at all. But I've had a drops set of interchangeables, and I've currently got a Knit Pro set. Not that they're cheap, but they're cheaper than the liquor by a considerable amount. And I just don't think there's anything that special about them that these don't do. Actually, I think the same for chow goos as well, and I have got some chow goos, so yeah. I can see the chow goos would be good for lace knitting because they're so sharp. But yeah, I think those and the mood bags and things like that, I think they are entirely, generally, I don't think the people that buy them necessarily want them for that, but I think the way that they've grown so popular is purely through the aesthetics of them, and they look good on Instagram, but I don't think there's actually anything special in terms of what they offer as a tool. So yeah, I don't think that necessarily is why people buy them. I don't think if you've got those things, that means you are just bothered about what they look like. I don't think that is necessarily indicative of the people that buy them. I don't think if you've bought them that means that you're just bothered about what they look like on Instagram, but I do think that's how they've become so popular, because they look good on Instagram, but I don't think they really offer much that other things can't. Certainly not enough for the price point to be as high as it is. Yeah, so that's my little takeaway. Okay, so now I've added my own unpopular knitting opinion on the end. That was everything I wanted to talk about today. I hope you've enjoyed it. It's like I say, if you've got any other unpopular knitting opinions you want me to talk about, I've just glossed over them today. We could do a proper full video about those if you wanted. I've just added a couple that people gave. If you've got any questions I didn't ask that you'd like me to answer, that I didn't answer that you'd like me to, pop them in the comments below, drop me an email, drop me an Instagram, anything directly. But I hope you've enjoyed. And yeah, just a huge thank you to all of you for being here and for supporting. Next week I'm going to Yarndale, and I'm fully intending to pick some stuff up that we can use as a giveaway, because I want to give something back to you guys. It's been a while since I've run a giveaway, so keep your eyes peeled. If you don't want to miss out on that, I'll be picking up probably some yarn. Let's be honest, I might pick up a kit or something. Something fun that you can make something with. So if you want to get involved in that when it comes out, that'll be on the next, probably off the back of the next video, which will be my Yarndale vlog. So make sure you make sure you subscribe so you don't miss when I post that, and you can put my subscriber numbers up even further, so then we get to 3,000 and I do another video like this or something a bit different. But yeah, just a huge thank you for being here, guys, for being here, for continuing to come back, and for being such a wonderful, welcoming community. When I originally hit 1,000 subscribers, I was a little bit nervous about doing a video like this because I didn't know how well it would go down. But now, having done another year nearly of being on YouTube, and having got to know so many more of you, so much more just through comments and through repeatedly speaking to you guys, I'm comfortable saying this. I'm comfortable sharing my unpopular knitting opinions, because I think I've got a fairly good idea of how they're going to be received. So yeah, thank you very much for listening to me waffle yet again. I will give you a brief update of where I'm at on that Oslo hat. We're going nicely now. I've still got, I said, didn't I, I was worried that I was going to run out of knitting. I've probably only done about 1.5 inches. But I was proper petrified that I was going to, I have a very inflated view of my own abilities. Let's just have a look at how much I've actually knit. Yeah, I've not even done that. So I've done about 2.25 inches total, but I think I had about 1/2 inch there already. So I've done, my maths is terrible. I had about 1/2 inch to begin with. I've now got about 2.25 inches. So I've done about 1.75 inches. And yeah, it's turning out really nicely. This yarn is gorgeous. This yarn is so gorgeous. Ignore that bit. But this yarn is really lovely. Yeah, by the time you see this next week, this is going to be finished. I'm very excited to have this and wear this. You can see a bit better now because there's actually some knitting above it. But that's more like what the hat will turn out like. You won't be able to see that blue at all. Anyway, enough about that. Thank you very much for watching, guys, and for spending your time with me. I hope you've had a great afternoon, evening, weekend, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye, guys.